There. That's fine, but that's usually.
Metro has rules on it.
Yeah, that's what.
That's why I can't because we talked about that before. Right? They won't make you board.
Yeah, it seems unfortunate. I'm all right. How about you? All right. So what I've done now is I've just opened this up, the PowerPoint. I'm going to click Present to Teams. Where was that button? It's in when you open Microsoft. When you open the application. Up in the corner. And then this is our problem. So yeah, we just have the PowerPoint running here, and I'm going to do share screen. That would work if we only need people to originate. This is many people to see our screen. That's what I'm saying. So I'm going to do. Yeah. There is shredding in a drawer. Let me see. It is. I'm trying to think where the where the key is. No, that's fine. Let's. No problem. See ya.
Did you get it to come up?
I think we're almost there.
Okay.
April, and I knew it was something important because she's at our front desk. So weren't we just going to just do the PowerPoint regular here and then have somebody else share it? We have to share it on here. We have to get audio here. That's why we ended that here. But what I can't do right now is I can't get. Let's do a minute. Make this present, right, which is what I need, but when...
And then click on the last, and then it should...
But the second part is, I need to share it's not letting people do that. Okay, there we go. Now I'm thinking of it. Yeah, I just had to be able to think. Okay, so now, what they see on here, see here, minimize this guy. We don't need a clicker. All the mics turned off. You make the mics turned off.
I turned those off. I wasn't sure, so I just, they're all put out together, so I'll turn it on.
No, we do. No, we didn't get that far. Yeah, because we're going to use it for both. For this, but also need you to do your,
Oh, yeah.
but I'm having
Well,
a,
I'll just sit over there with them. What's wrong with it? I gotta get that job.
okay. Like not even, maybe I'll try another jumper. Yeah, it's not. Can I just try yours?
Yeah.
See,
I mean, if you need it, you can use it.
because it's not doing it like, did you know, like, I recognize you? Oh, it's not turning on. Is that my phone? Oh my god. Oh my god. Now let's try that.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fine.
And then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna start
structure that was Morning and Happy New Year. I will call our Transportation Policy Board meeting to order. And first of all, I want to welcome everyone today. Mayor Vogel is a little under the weather, and I'm not sure what was up with Mayor Mulder. So they asked me to sit in, which I was happy to do as past chair. So we do have people that are joining us online today as well. So our first item of business is approval of the meeting minutes. Those came in your packet. Are there any additions or corrections that need to be made? Seeing none, do I have a motion? So motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes pass. We'll now move on to item 2, which is our public comment phase. If there's anyone here who would like to address the board, you may come forward at this time. Okay, no one to address the board today, so we'll move on to item 3, which is action items, and there are none today. I don't remember a time when I was chair that there were no action items, so how did that happen? I don't think that was very fair. So, listen to you. Are you running for office? So we'll move on to item 4, which are our informational items. And our first one is our annual member orientation. And I know for some of us, we've been on the board for quite a while. I think it is always good for us to get a refresher on what our roles and responsibilities are on the board. And for those that are new, it might be the first time you're getting to hear this. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to staff. I'm not sure who's going to take this one. Sean, are you taking this one?
Can everybody hear me? Great. Thank you, Mayor Reed. I'll start and just give a quick introduction to this topic. And so, as Mayor Reed mentioned, we try and give a refresher on the overview of the GNRC and the MPO program within GNRC about once a year. And so today we wanted to provide a refresher, and we'll cover a number of items today, but I think this was more of a refresher than a full introduction to GNRC and the MPO program. If you still have any questions after we go through today's presentation and you want to get a deeper dive into any aspects of the MPO program or GNRC, just reach out to staff and we can schedule a one-on-one meeting with you all. And so today, Michael's going to start and give an overview of the GNRC and the various programs. And then I'll turn it back over to me, and I'll walk through kind of the purpose of the Transportation Policy Board, cover some of the MPO requirements that we fulfill, cover some of the member roles and responsibilities that you all have in that process, showcase some of the tools and resources that we have available and displayed on our website, and then just mention some of the emerging issues and opportunities that we'll be diving into as we carry out the program in the coming year. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michael to get us started.
Thank you, Sean. I'll take the little power stick here. All right, awesome. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back with you here early in 2022. I'm going to have the privilege of talking a little bit about the Greater Nashville Regional Council to set the stage for Sean's overview of federal funding requirements, roles, responsibilities, and how we go about carrying out the work on behalf of the Transportation Policy Board to help Middle Tennessee address its transportation challenges. Quick refresher on GNRC as a whole. I think a lot of you are familiar with the history of the Greater Nashville Regional Council, which is one of 9 Tennessee development districts that were created back in the 60s. And so the state legislature, largely incentivized by the federal government back in the 60s, created these regional councils or development districts to help facilitate local brainstorming on how to invest federal, state dollars into infrastructure and social services. Their incentive to do that was this was a time of our nation's history where the federal government was requiring local coordination and consultation with the expenditure of federal funds for infrastructure. The MPO program was born largely out of a need to make sure that state DOTs were involving local decision makers in the process for how federal funds were to be used to invest in the transportation system. But transportation wasn't the only initiative at the federal level that really incentivized the states to create these development districts. The Older Americans Act of 1967 was also passed, which was an incentive by the federal government to have the states work with local leaders on prioritizing federal investments and social services and programs to help an aging population across America. Economic Development Public Works Act in the 60s called for the creation of economic development districts across America, and the GNRC was the economic development district that was created by statute through this act that I'm referring to. Purpose there was to facilitate local collaboration and collaboration with state agencies for how the U.S. Department of Commerce was going to help build infrastructure to support job creation, job retention across America. And so there were a series of these acts out of Congress that really encouraged, if not required, collaboration to happen within America's regions. And so led to the states creating development districts or regional councils. Often those are used interchangeably in terms of the terms. We were created as a development district to represent 13 counties in northern Middle Tennessee. You see on the map there the other 8 development districts across the state of Tennessee. There is I talked a little bit about these designations. So we're designated as by the U.S. Department of Commerce, Economic Development Administration as the Economic Development District for Middle Tennessee. With that comes the responsibility to develop a regional comprehensive economic development strategy, which you all adopted back in December last month. We're designated by the Administration on Community Living at the federal level and the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability as the area agency on aging and disability here in Middle Tennessee. We add disability to that designation for our region. In that role, we help prioritize state and federal investments, again, for social services aimed at helping our population remain in place as long as possible as they age. And then, of course, a really important designation to this board would be as the Metropolitan Planning Organization, help facilitate, carry out the planning requirements in order for you all to access Federal Highway, Federal Transit Administration funds for investments into transportation. Those aren't the only designations. The membership resource guide that we put forward in the agenda packet goes through some of the other roles that we play as a result of formal designations, either by a state or federal agency. So I encourage you to take a look at that within your packet, which is also online. The council does exist in a physical form. It's a 93-member regional council, which meets annually at least to certify the executive board that will meet monthly to act on its behalf throughout the year. But the 93-member regional council body is made up of the municipal mayors and the county mayors across that 13-county footprint. They're joined by 26 private citizens that are appointed to the council by county mayors. Each county mayor appoints an individual from their county to represent business and commerce issues and an individual from their county to represent social equity and inclusion issues. And so those private citizens represent those issues on our board to make sure that the policies that we're adopting, the plans that we're adopting are responsive to the needs of the business community and all Middle Tennesseans across the region. Joining the 26 appointees and all the mayors and county executives are 2 state legislators, one from the state House and one from the Senate. And so that's how you arrive at the 93-member regional council body. And you can see there the distribution of the membership by county, which is, again, largely driven by the number of municipalities within each of those counties. We describe our organization and its structure in a couple of different ways. This org chart is describing the functional structure of the organization. So at the top there, we have the members of the regional council or that council body, which annually certifies an executive board that will meet after this meeting today. It's what is enacting the work program and budget that's adopted by that full council throughout the year. But the regional council is also through its bylaws, provided for the establishment, operation of independent policy boards. And so these are policy boards that are staffed by the organization, largely comprised of the members of the organization, but have independent authority to adopt plans and programs that they're empowered to pursue through state or federal law. Two examples of that would be the Transportation Policy Board, which is meeting here today. So y'all adopt the Regional Transportation Plan and the Transportation Improvement Program, and some of the other things that Sean will talk about, independently from the decision-making authority of the Regional Council. We also created in the 80s a board to manage our small business lending programs out of GNRC and approve loans. That's called the Mid-Cumberland Area Development Corporation. And then those boards and the full council are advised by a series of advisory committees. The key committee that advises this body is the Transportation Coordinating Committee that is pulling together city and county government staff, state agency staff, and other transportation stakeholders to formulate recommendations that come to you on a regular basis. Those also are the partners on the ground that ultimately will be implementing the projects or the initiatives that are adopted into the Regional Transportation Plan or Transportation Improvement Program. But you can see there's a series of advisory committees that link back to the organizational chart. At the bottom of this graphic are what we call the roundtable network. These are informal gatherings of practitioners or policymakers that are created for the purposes of brainstorming and brainstorming beyond the government institution of GNRC. So these roundtables are pulling in practitioners from both the public and private sector to help set an agenda for the organization and ultimately figure out how to get implemented the priorities of leadership. Sometimes those things get implemented through the GNRC agency itself. Sometimes those things get implemented through other agencies or the member governments themselves. A couple of examples of our roundtables are the Middle Tennessee Mayor's Caucus, which you all serve on as well, the Solid Waste Directors Roundtable, the IT Directors Roundtable, and the Middle Tennessee Tourism Council, which exists to provide a bridge to the State Department of Tourist Development, prioritize how we're spending dollars on marketing cultural and tourist assets across Middle Tennessee. And then I'll talk a little bit about our staffing using another graphic, but you see there the spoken wheel sort of representation of how we are staffed. And I'll go ahead and move into that. So for administration and staffing, what you're seeing on the left side of this graphic are sort of that board and committee structure that we just walked through. And then you see the executive director, and then you see our department heads in the next couple of columns. We're really organized into really three verticals. Our business lines are aging and disability services, community and regional planning, and economic and community development. And so most of our staff are housed within one of those departments. But those departments are connected together through a couple of horizontal functions: communications and marketing, which cuts across all of those to make sure our messaging and our work stays coordinated from a public participation standpoint. A research and analytics function, which cuts across to make sure that we're looking at trends and emerging issues in a way that is fruitful, because all these issues are very much connected. And then a policy and government affairs function that's cutting across all three of those verticals to make sure that the policies that we're pursuing, the feedback that we're providing on proposed rulemaking, proposed legislation is thoughtful and comprehensive in nature. And then as you go down the staffing org chart, you can see ultimately sort of how we manage the individual programs within those individual departments. Here in a bit, Sean's going to talk a little bit more about how we staff the NTO program and the Transportation Policy Board specifically once I get through the rest of the GNRC orientation. We're 80-plus professionals at GNRC. Often at these meetings, you're seeing our local and regional planners, our research analysts, our policy analysts, policy advisors, but we have a pretty deep bench back of the office: social workers, community development coordinators, economic development coordinators that you are working with on a regular basis, even though you may not see them at a transportation policy board meeting. And they all work together across the organization to make sure that we're approaching any problem that we're trying to solve from a comprehensive point of view, and that we're leveraging resources adequately enough to address those issues. This is I'll leave this slide with you all, and it's already in your agenda packet anyway, but this is sort of a look at the specific services or programs within each of those three verticals that I mentioned, and some of the offerings within our policy and government affairs group and our research and analytics group. This breaks out really well in the membership resource guide that's in your packet. You'll have access to key contacts on staff for any of these programs and services that you're interested in. I love this slide because it shows the impact that this organization has on Middle Tennessee. Each of these dots represent an interaction through one of our programs with a community or an individual household or an individual person across the last year. So obviously there's a lot going on in the urban areas, but the benefits of GNRC to local communities is far and wide, and we do quite a bit of work out in the rural parts of our region as well to make sure that folks have good infrastructure, good social services to help sustain their quality of life. A couple of years ago, it wasn't the case that the Transportation Policy Board was staffed by the GNRC. So for much of its history, since the 60s, early 70s, really, when the National Urban Transportation Study was formed, which ultimately became known as the National Area MPO, the policy board of the MPO was staffed by Metropolitan Government of Nashville-Davidson County. So the staff of the MPO were housed at Metropolitan Planning Department, which is obviously one of the local government members of the MPO as a whole. A couple of years ago, the boards got together to talk about potentially a different arrangement moving forward as our region continues to face issues with rapid growth and development. There's an increasing need, not only as a federal requirement, but as just we know it's the right thing to do, to make sure that the decisions about transportation infrastructure are made within a broader context, thinking about economic and community development, social services, environmental quality. And so we looked at the potential to integrate the MPO program into the Greater Nashville Regional Council, which is the regional organization that that works on all those other issues. The other benefit here is that the GNRC is owned and operated by the member governments, and so you wouldn't have this sort of appearance of conflict of interest with the MPO program being housed within one of the local government members of the region, which isn't anything that was really ever alleged at this setting. But from time to time, we've had projects where there were accusations that the MPO is very Davidson County centric, and so another sort of catalyst to us looking at a different way of staffing the MPO program. So we formed a task force that was made up of leadership from the GNRC board and the MPO board at the time, who really identified 10 shared goals for better regional coordination. And this is, we'll make sure this is a handout that used to circulate quite a bit, but it was everything from just better leveraging grants from state and federal sources to get complete projects on the ground, to streamlining the work of regional governance and cooperation, try to minimize the confusion about Alphabet Soup Day, which is something we're still working on. But there's a list of 10 reasons why integration was really, the potential for integration is really important to folks. The other is, the reality is, at the time, this is actually a higher number now, but MPO, when you look at the regions of 1 million or more in population, the MPO program is staffed by the regional council. 7 out of 10 of those MPOs are staffed by the regional council or integrated part of the council programming. It's actually higher now because since this statistic, San Francisco, Nashville, both of those metropolitan areas have integrated. So it's really the idea of bringing the region in line with its peer metros across America, whether we're talking about the Atlanta Regional Commission, which serves as the MPO for that region, or the Puget Sound Regional Council in Seattle, or the Denver Regional Council of Governments, or the Mid-America Regional Council in Kansas City, the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission in Columbus, Ohio. Many of the peers that we benchmark ourselves had this model in place at the time that we were looking at integration. Another reason was to elevate the work of agency staff. Agency staff at the time, and we took several surveys of our staff, both on the MPO side as well as the GNRC staff, to gauge not only their interest and excitement, but their issues and concerns with the potential for integration. And I think one of the big takeaways here was the promise that by having the transportation planning program embedded within the regional council, it was going to elevate the work of everybody across the board. It's going to make our work much more meaningful to have sort of that streamlining and that sort of integrated thinking and planning about Middle Tennessee's future, given the significant nature of transportation decisions and how they influence everything else that we're trying to tackle at a regional scale. And then finally, I mentioned this earlier, just the idea of better leveraging state and federal resources, and this is something that's been encouraged by the federal government for years. It's just thinking beyond the grant silos that exist in D.C., trying to figure out how to leverage a Department of Commerce grant with a U.S. DOT grant and an EPA grant, a HUD grant, to make sure that we're building complete communities and not overly siloing off our funds and limiting our opportunities to do big transformational projects for our region. The process was fairly long. It was about a year process using that task force to get to the decision to integrate the MPO program into GNRC. All that was pretty well documented, but several meetings with that task force, several updates to the board. We convened our state and federal partners multiple times. We convened our private sector partners multiple times, allowed them an opportunity to help shape what that integration would look like. As I wrap up my part and kind of hand it over to Sean, I wanted to sort of look at the state of transportation planning across Tennessee. You are all familiar with the Metropolitan Planning Organization process, the MPO process that y'all govern here in the 7-county Nashville metropolitan area. That's one of 11 MPOs across the state of Tennessee. Those MPOs shown here on this map in gray. The GNRC footprint also includes counties who are participants in 2 rural planning organizations, the Middle Tennessee RPO and the Dale Hollow RPO. And so we have a spot on the boards and the committees for those RPOs, with the intent being to make sure that we're doing the best we can to coordinate transportation decisions across the broader area, providing that bridge to TDOT, Department of Economic and Community Development. Other state agencies are wanting to make sure that we're thinking about transportation infrastructure beyond either city and county boundaries or just sort of the traditional boundaries of MPOs and RPOs. And so a lot of the work that we do on transportation extends beyond the MPO footprint as we support the 2 RPOs in our region as well. So that's a look at GNRC as a whole. You all are familiar with the footprint of the Nashville area MPO, which actually pulls in Murray County from the South Central Tennessee Development District into our MPO programming. That's not super uncommon. The development districts, their geography is often driven by the issues, not necessarily the footprint of their board. But I'll let Sean dig a little bit deeper into the purpose of the Transportation Policy Board and how they go about carrying out its responsibilities through the organization here in Middle Tennessee.
Great, thank you, Michael. So we'll jump into the purpose of the Transportation Policy Board and the MPO program and the various requirements. Can everyone hear me okay? So the primary purpose of the Transportation Policy Board is that it provides a forum for collaboration, not only across elected officials, public transit operators, TDOT, and other state and federal agencies. And that's to provide the opportunity for a mutually agreed upon plan to invest the federal funds that we're getting for various transportation improvements like roadways, bridges, public transit within our region. And one of the, in order to represent the collective interests across the region, the Transportation Policy Board also provides an opportunity for the public and key stakeholders within the region to help shape those transportation decisions and investment strategies. The Transportation Policy Board is made up of more than 30 members. We have representation across our 7 counties, elected officials from our city and county governments, as well as TDOT being a lead state partner within the MPO program. We also have representation from the public transit as well as from Federal Highway Administration and Federal Transit Administration. We in going into some of the requirements, we have federal legislation that really guides a lot of the rules and regulations for carrying out the transportation planning process across the country and within our region. The latest federal legislation is the FAST Act, which has been extended by the recent bipartisan infrastructure bill, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And that defines kind of 10 specific federal planning factors that we have to take into account and consider when we're making transportation investment decisions. And I'll just point out a couple of those. One of them being supporting the economic vitality within the metropolitan area, protecting the environment, and enhancing travel and tourism. And I think some of those, as Michael noted, overlap with a lot of the other plans and programs within GNRC, and through the SEDS that we recently adopted, or our work with the Tennessee Tourism Council. And so I think that's highlights another one of those main reasons for the integration, to better link some of that work and leverage some of those investments. So the three main core products that we develop is the Regional Transportation Plan, the Transportation Improvement Program, and our UPWP, or Transportation Planning Work Program. Starting with the Regional Transportation Plan, which really kind of sets the vision for the long term and identifies a lot of the goals that we want to achieve as a region, is really the foundational document that we all rely on you for input into where we want the region to be in the next 20 or 25 years. And it also identifies a lot of how we're going to spend that funding. And so we identified over $10 billion in investments over the next 25 years, and adopted that plan in February of 2021. We update that every 5 years, and so the next scheduled adoption would be February of 2026. Identifying kind of that blueprint through the Regional Transportation Plan is then identifying those investments to then implement through our short-term capital program, or our Transportation Improvement Program. That identifies a lot of the investments that are going to be utilizing federal funds over the next 4 years. And we're currently in the process of updating that with a adoption scheduled for fall of 2022. And then lastly, we have our work program, which lays out the planning studies and work that staff is going to be engaged in and carrying out over the next 2 years. We really utilize this to support some of the decision making that we make, both towards investments as well as strategies to pursue for our region. And the current work program will take us through to federal fiscal year 2023, and so scheduled to next adopt that document in August of 2023.
Michelle, can you mouse onto the screen?
Thank you. The batteries real quick. Oh, might be it. So some of the roles and responsibilities, particularly of you all as members of the Transportation Policy Board, we'll dive into that a little bit. Obviously, the Transportation Policy Board, as we mentioned, made up of stakeholders across the region, supported by our Transportation Coordinating Committee, as well as some of our other committees, such as the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Transportation Coordinating Committee is made up of a lot of staff, planners, engineers, city managers from across the region, really shaping some of those recommendations that we bring to the Transportation Policy Board. Our Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee is grappling with a lot of the issues related to bicycle and pedestrian needs and challenges within our region, to help shape and weigh in on some of those work within our region and some of the projects that are advancing within our region. And then on the GNRC side, supported by not only our in-house staff of planners and data analysts and policy advisors, as well as communications staff, but also for certain products, going out and working with consultants or nonprofit partners on specific studies or ongoing programs to support our work within the region. So kind of on a broader level, some of the responsibilities focus on working cooperatively across political boundaries. This is a regional forum where we're working across levels of government, across socioeconomic groups and economic sectors, and really to identify that shared region, vision for the region that we had discussed as part of the development of the Regional Transportation Plan. Also a willingness to prioritize transportation needs according to known constraints, fiscal or otherwise. And so this, as we get into not only the RTP and the TIP, but identifying projects that might be outside of your jurisdiction that have high needs and high costs for funding. Identifying strategies and resources to overcome anticipated obstacles to success, which we grapple with through our regional transportation plan and investments through the TIP. Also considering future generations, and this gets to kind of the long-term trends that we need to be considering as we're also investing in short-term priorities. And then thinking comprehensively about the relationship between transportation decisions and those related to other topics in areas of planning, such as housing, the economy, jobs, land use, community design, the environment through conservation and preservation, social services, and others. And so this gets to that, factoring in those other federal planning factors and thinking about transportation, how it factors into the other issues that we deal with within our region. And then measuring that performance so that we're continually monitoring and improving as we move forward, and factoring that into future decisions. And so, when it gets into the specifics, those roles kind of break down to representing your community within these conversations that we have, attending our meetings, voting on behalf of your jurisdiction or your agency. We do have membership dues as part of the MPO, so paying those dues, providing data and information to our data team so that we can continue to enhance the data that we have available and then share back to you. And then implementing regional policies and plans that this group has established. And so that obviously has benefits to you all, that the information that we get from you, we are able to provide back and allow you to access through our websites and dashboards and maps. We're also able to analyze those trends and report back to you. Obviously, going through the MPO process keeps us eligible for federal grant opportunities, and staff can provide additional planning and technical assistance to support your local staff, and given some of the expertise that we have in-house. And then obviously, just coming back to the forum for collaboration, being able to meet with your peers on a monthly basis to interact and share best practices. Some of the key documents that we have to kind of document and formalize this process and how we carry out the transportation planning process within our region include a transportation planning prospectus and organizational bylaws to provide not only overview of the process, but kind of the procedures that govern how that process is carried out. Transportation policy and planning agreement to formalize the relationship between our Transportation Policy Board and GNRC, given that the Transportation Policy Board has ultimate authority and decision-making on how the federal transportation planning funds are allocated and spent. And then the transportation planning agreement between the partners, the Transportation Policy Board, TDOT, and federal partners, or the public transit agencies, on how they will work together to carry out that process. We also have a public participation plan that identifies how we're going to communicate with our partners and provide the public with opportunities to provide input and feedback into our process. And then lastly, federal certification review to the certification by federal partners that the MPO program is being carried out in accordance with the rules and regulations identified within the federal transportation bill. So all these documents are available online at gnrc.org/publications. Some of the other tools and resources that we have available, hopefully a number of you have already explored some of these on our website, but you can access a lot of the transportation material at gnrc.org/transportation. A lot of the tools that we have, maps and dashboards, you can find through our data portal. Some of the specific tools that we have developed recently, particularly related to the 3 core documents of the to track projects related to the Regional Transportation Plan and the TIP, are listed here. A regional plan map, our interactive TIP database, where you can see projects that are have federal funds programmed over the next 4 years. We have another TIP amendment application that you can track the amendments and see what projects have been included or changed. And then also TDOT has a recent application, their iTrip, that contains even additional projects that TDOT are going through TDOT's project development process throughout our region. Also this is included in your packet, the membership resource guide, which contains a lot of information some of the information we've covered today about the purpose, mission, some of our designations, organizational structure, but you can read more about that as well on the website if you didn't print off your packet today. And then we also have social media on various social media channels and post a lot of relevant information and news and headlines that are going on in the region related to the growth and development and investment decisions that are being made. And so we encourage you to follow us, our social medias, and help get that information disseminated to not only your staff, but your partners within the region as well. And so lastly, on this section, just wanted to touch on some of the emerging issues that kind of segues into some of the topics that we're going to be covering in the upcoming calendar year. And so obviously, MPO's roles continue to evolve and change as the world changes, but I think some of the issues and opportunities that have emerged and have been noted by members or by state and federal partners or other MPOs that we look to as peers in some of the issues that they're grappling with. I think some of the common ones that have come up are as data has become even more widely available during the pandemic, and data sharing and data needs and the capabilities associated with that that reside at the staff or don't reside at the staff level, whether that be local or within the MPO program. And then also just the costs of that data and being able to figure out a way to get access to it and to be able to share it across the various stakeholders within the region. Obviously, with the pandemic brought a surge in telecommuting, and I think we've seen that some of the telecommuting has remained more permanent, or at least for certain days of the week. A growth in delivery, particularly freight, and kind of increasing with freight delivery within neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, and some of the issues that arise from that. I think we've continued to see that early coordination between TDOT, MPOs, and local governments is essential, not only for planning purposes, but to help with implementation of projects that we've programmed for funding within the TIP. Another issue is the increase in crash severity for users across our system, and trying to reverse that trend. Looking to advance racial equity and support for vulnerable populations through our plans and transportation investments. And then with the increase in electric vehicles is trying to transition to cleaner energy and a more resilient future. And so those are just some of the issues and opportunities that we've highlighted, but also want to open it up, and if there's any other topics of interest or issues and opportunities that members wanted to note, that to ensure that we get that captured and find an opportunity to bring that back to you all. So with that, we can that concludes our orientation, but happy to take any questions or any feedback.
One thing I wanted to add related to emerging issues and opportunities, and it begs back something that Mayor Brady said in a previous meeting when we were talking about very much that early coordination piece, and the world that we're in right now with the great influx of new federal grant programs, the 13 to 14 loans, federal highway training, and NOFA's coming out all the time, and so forth. The notion that, I know we have a prioritized bill, I know we have a prioritized transportation plan, but the notion that our ambition is growing commensurate with all the opportunities that is coming out, and that can influence how we are prioritizing and how we're all working together for true regionally connected, efficient projects. I think it's worth a revisit at this point. I don't know if you can get to committee or whatever, but I'm just saying, I think that the growth in opportunity and the growth in ambition from all of us to accompany that opportunity warrants a relook at prioritization of effort in order to make sure that we're matching and we're leveraging the maximum to the maximum benefit.
Are you thinking specifically more for the regional transportation plan or the TIP? Okay. So say with the TIP, we do have an opportunity with the TIP update cycle to kind of revisit projects that are progressing.
I would make opportunities for both. We're in a different world right now. There's a lot of change out there. It's a brand new program, and we're all going to be addressing because that's who we are, right? And so the notion of how it all fits together and how that comes prioritized, because I can see there being a number of different, the amendment that we brought forward will not be the first for that. That are things that, we kind of don't know about now, or hadn't thought about exactly how to cover it. Something emerging in the development area of what it's probably right now in the cycle of both federal funding and national metro middle city growth. I think it's a wise moment to and sort of reset on all of that.
And I don't disagree with that at all. I just think we're all going to have to be open with each other about the projects that we're trying to bring forward so that we can get the money.
So it's not a competition, it's
Absolutely. Because when y'all benefit, Rose County benefits too. And I think it's the same with all of us. Don't get me wrong. There are times I would love to have some of the projects y'all are getting or Murfreesboro gets or whatever, but it makes us all stronger as a region.
And otherwise, I think if we don't do that, Mayor, I think what happens is we start to get into one-off because we all are still trying to take right?
Right.
But it's really important that we take advantage of everything together. So I think it's worth taking a minute and resetting.
Yeah, and I think staff can help facilitate, as we know more from the new discretionary programs that become available, is try and take that information to work with you all to identify what those candidate pool of projects looks like across the region that would be aligned well with those discretionary grant programs.
We did that in Metro, I sent it over to you for everybody. What we did is we took our transportation plan and we matched it to all of the new infrastructure bill opportunities and opportunities so that our council and the mayor's office could see what are the strategies that need to be being developed to go along with those specific buckets or discrete opportunities that we've already thoughtfully matched them in a way that gives them definitely. So I think
stimulus kind of exercise here, and then that forces some of that much more regional thought process. Mayor, to your point, we're not competing on everything, but we got to prioritize in order to do that as more of it. Other questions or comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I just wanted to make a little comment. I agree with what was in times. I agree with making sure that we're working together to take advantage of everything that's coming down and programs that are built, the expanded eligibility that are built. But I just want to reiterate, the NPO and the GNRC is not ending. And I appreciate the slide that talks about the agreement between the GNRC and the Transportation Planning Board, that they were the same as the one board. Okay? And so the geographies are different, and there's worth noting, the geographies are different. The funding is different. And we need to make sure that we're segregating the planning from the staff time, all the people that will put up on board representing GNRC staff, we got to make sure that we are segregating the funding for incentive transportation and the processes in place for that. So it's not the same. And I also appreciate on your slide that indicates that it's up to the Transportation Planning Board, this body, to determine where it's going to go, how they want to spend it, how it's prioritized, and how it's going to work. So just to be clear, the GNRC is the NGO, not the same.
Yeah, it's a good distinction. It's not different, though, than the other metros that we referred to earlier. A lot of the times, NPO programming within a regional council has a different footprint than the overall geography of the respective regional council. And, you know, when we pursued integration, it was really important for us to understand how that was being done across America and think that the agreement that was put into place is representative of a best practice to make sure that dollars are accounted for in an appropriate manner. But the NPO was not the same as metro government either, which was the arrangement for the early history, for most of the history of the NPO program. So appreciate that, Pam.
I understand we don't want to benchmark and we want to look at it, but we've got to make sure that what we're doing is connected to the company for the national level. So it's always very good to go get other information, but if it doesn't work for us, it doesn't work.
And I think the board does a good job of figuring out what does work.
And you brought it up to that's kind of what and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you can always talk around in circles, but you can always be, more than one.
Well, I just want to make sure that the board understands, this board understands, the responsibility for spending transportation funding that flows through HWA, EI, FTA, other transportation organizations in the U.S. is the responsibility of the board. The first part of the presentation was a discussion of GNRC's responsibility. I totally understand that. But we have very different responsibilities at the national NPO level and at the GNRC, and we just want to make sure that this board understands that those responsibilities are clear, not blurred, and then while the GNRC staff supports the national NPO activities, those activities need to be segregated to make sure that we're respecting the boundaries that are the geographic boundaries that are set up for the NPO as well as the activities.
Well, following up on that, are you concerned that what we call previous GNRC?
I'm sorry, the previous NPO?
The NPO, whatever we call it today, what it is, the NPO is too dependent on the development issue.
I can't say that. I don't intend. I'm not sure I really understand the question.
So my question is,
the development
you're saying the NPO, we're not an RPO, we're an NPO. The NPO, there's not enough separation between it and the development district, or because that's what you're saying, we need to make sure that the two entities are separated and one stands alone acts way is intended by the other. Okay.
Yes, that there is an independence and a recognition that they are not the same. How you choose and how is the MPO. Previously it was with the city, national, and now this is with the GNRC. That's your board, that's your entirely. And the same segregated responsibility is for the system in charge of that when that was that's what GNRC does for the national service. Matt, I don't know if you want to jump in.
Well, I think in the past, in the NPOs, when I was at the NPO, on the rental planning, they were dedicated staff that 100% of the NPO responsibility. We had, it was shown on the slide that, roughly 80 staff members that did basic pieces of NPO were dedicated. So to go out and what we were using was to make sure that the hours assigned to that match the projects that are being delivered. So it's a little cloudier than it used to be, but it was what was approved many years ago. So coming into this, we're having to work with that system right now, and we have certification and things like that. We can discuss the complications of that. So I think one other thing that might be worth discussing is how, as Pam alluded to, the board is the body that makes the decisions. We want to make sure that they recognize that everybody at the table are the ones that dictate what happens in the street. It should not be staff providing the recommendations all the time. It needs to be a discussion from this board that trickles down to the staff to make decisions.
Madam Chair, I think, the conversation is really important. I think the members of this body deserve a lot of credit for the thoughtfulness with which they put together the agreement and that they amended the bylaws of the respective organizations to make sure that independent decision-making authority for the RTP and the TIP were protected. That had never been in writing before. It is put into writing now as a result of the integration process. And Matt and I did work together as Metro staff, but it wasn't fully dedicated. Throughout its history, there were staffers who were not fully dedicated by Metro to the MPO program, nor are staff across the state of Tennessee fully dedicated to respective programs. And when we looked at integration, that was part of the desire, is that you have economic community development specialists within the regional council who can contribute to the MPO program. So, a lot of that was very intentional and very much applauded as a best practice at the national level. But I'm really proud of the work of the board to protect the independent decision-making authority of the body. And, we started off by emphasizing that again in the orientation today, that the decision about what projects go into the RTP and the TIP are, solely rest within the authority of the Transportation Policy Board. And it's not the only board or committee within our organizational structure that has granted that authority at the GNRC.
Our membership is much larger than our participation. We all know. And we got the same members who show up over and over and over. And the same members who consistently don't show up. I mean, what's this all about? The point I'm not saying good or bad, or indifferent, but Federal Transportation Administration, Tennessee Department of Transportation, it's a reoccurring thing. They have concerns. That's why I asked you the question. I wouldn't try to put you on the spot. All I'm saying is, they feed us. There's And especially today, there's even more money being thrown at the system. I just want to make sure that I leave this board, I feel very comfortable with leadership. Michael Bright, we've got some great leadership here. But we need to address those concerns in some way and put an end to this. And the reason I'm saying that is, now this is coming from the heart. This is not directed at anybody. But a house divided is never good. And we've seen that. I've seen that in local government. If we can consistently get together and compromise and ask for X, not X, Y, and Z, we're not going to be effective. And I think this organization can be more effective if we get complete buy-in. And I don't think this is about individuals, because, and I know you work for people, and I know, Matt, you work for people. This is not just coming from you two, this is coming from other concerns in the organization. I guess we have to say. I don't know what we do to address those, whether we put a committee together, to really address those and get that out of the way. If we need some greater separation, what we put together won't be pulled apart. It's not suspicious. I'm not advocating anything, but I am advocating that we address these concerns rather than talk around them. We've been talking around them for, what, 2-3 years? And I'm just bringing out that point. And I'm not trying to belittle anybody. I think it behooves all of us, especially those who consistently show up and participate. Because we've got the same folks, the same mayors, the same city managers, and we're stakeholders. Michael's right. We make the decision. The tail doesn't wag the dog. We've got great staff. We've got great leadership. Michael's management. But until those are really addressed, it's going to be something that continues to fester and concern. So I want to bring up that point. Because I hear that over and over.
And I don't disagree with you, but one thing I do know is the staff we have work hard day in and day out to bring us as a board the information we need to be able to make decisions. I do not think that they spoon feed us and that they're making the decision and we're just representing. I don't think that. If we are, then each one of us are not doing our job, because that's not our job as members of the legislature. I also agree that I feel like this is not a partnership with everybody that is sitting around this table, and it's really uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for us as cities and communities that we're trying to get projects done, not only for ourselves, but for as a region. And sometimes it feels like we're not all working towards the same goal. I don't know what we have to do. I think we have to be honest. I think we have to not talk around things, whether it's us as mayors, whether it's GNRC, whether it's FHWA, whether it's people. I don't know how we can change things unless we are open and honest. I will tell you, going through the process of getting the plan passed was probably the most frustrating thing I've ever had to do in everything I've done in politics. Trying to get everybody working towards a common goal was difficult. I think everybody had good intentions, all that underlying stuff, exactly what they're talking about. And until people are willing to say what that is, I don't know.
Well, and I totally agree with you. And I'm not disparaging anyone.
Absolutely.
Anyone. I think you've all done an amazing job. But for some reason, we're not on the same page. And until we get on the same page, we're going to be less effective. This is the most dynamic NPO in the state of Tennessee. Hands down. Let's be honest. This is the most dynamic development district in the state of Tennessee. And so we have many advantages. We have an economy that's incredible. We have leadership in our mayors and our city managers, in our development district, the NPO, TDOT, our governor, our federal highway administration. We have so many advantages. If we can somehow get to this issue that we keep talking around and sweeping under the rug and get ourselves together so the stakeholders can address it and move forward, I think we're going to be a much more effective and dynamic organization. And I don't want to stretch a cab, but I agree with Madam Chairman, until we really address it, until we get our heads around this, and sit people in and say, okay, what's the issue? Let's address it. We're going to have this problem over and over again, and I like to see things function at 100%, not 80 or 90%. And I feel like that's kind of where we are. And if I had to go around and point a finger, I guess I'm going to point a finger at me. I'm going to say, I've been here, we've talked, we've discussed issues, we're still moving forward. It's a good thing. We've got a lot of projects done, but we just haven't been able to do it somehow. I don't know how we can do that. And I guess I'm asking all of you, much smarter than I am, how do we put our heads together? How do we come up with a solution to this to get everyone, to get the stakeholders, to make the stakeholders satisfied that we're moving right?
But in doing that, I want to make sure staff understands how important they are. Because I don't think that they have always felt that way, that what they're doing is important. So I just want to make sure we as a board don't forget that.
And the big takeaway, no one here feels. That's tough. When you feel like you're in the corner, you're threatened, then you're not going to be open and transparent. You're going to be defensive. And we don't want that because we got too much to say. So I've said my piece, Madam Chairman. Thank you for my indulgence. I'm just really interested in trying to get the bottom of what's going on.
Anybody else have comments or questions? Okay. We will move on to meeting calendar for 2022. And Sean, taking it?
Yeah, Michael gets started first.
Yeah, just acknowledge we're a little over time and leading into the executive board meeting, which is really a good segue into this agenda item, which is that this morning we wanted to talk with you a little bit about a different approach for this year. We've got a lot of member feedback over the last couple of years, a decade plus to be honest with you, about the nature of these alphabet soup days and the amount of information that's crammed into these meetings. And, I remember a couple of meetings ago, Mayor Moore asking specifically for us to think about a different way of approaching these meetings. He'd like to have a little bit more time to chew on the information and be less sort of constrained within the day. Many others of you want to make sure that we're taking advantage, though, of you all coming to town on the same day of the month. And so what we wanted to share with you this morning is the approach for 2022 that will hopefully simplify our approach to meetings, as well as prevent the sort of the constant running over into the next space and everybody always feeling rushed. And so I'm going to start off talking about sort of the big picture with GNRC meetings in 2022, and then turn it over to Sean to give you a preview of the meeting topics, the key action items that are on slate for the rest of 2022. That'll really be a call to action to you all to help us populate the rest of the calendar with topics of interest that y'all want to be talking about at these TPB meetings. The big takeaway here is that we're going to basically just do one GNRC meeting a month. The GNRC meeting will be at 10:15 of the month. It'll be a Transportation Policy Board meeting or an Executive Board meeting. I will show you the calendar here in a second. That'll give you, a 2-hour window to really take your time, go through the information. We're trying to give you a little bit more access to what's in store for the coming year, so you can help structure and curate the topics for these agendas. Sean's going to do that. But the big takeaway here is the monthly boards, 10:15, largely in this location, and just to help simplify all of this for everyone. We do have a couple of backup dates in the year if we need to meet more often than what's scheduled. But with that, let me turn it over to Sean for a preview of the Transportation Policy Board action items, informational items for this year, and then at the next meeting, the Executive Board that we'll get started with here in a second, we'll do a deeper dive into the Executive Board programming for 2022.
Thanks, Michael. So the Transportation Policy Board meetings are indicated at the light blue color, and so in addition to our January meeting, we would then start meeting in February and kind of alternate every other month. So meetings in February, April, June, August, September as well, and then November. And we have those meeting dates if necessary for July and December. But throughout the course of the calendar, we have the TIP amendments basically scheduled for almost every meeting, and that's a change that we'll discuss. And then some of the other kind of key action items that we have throughout the year. Next month is the adoption of our annual safety targets. And then when we get into August, an amendment to our UPWP to capture any updates. And then September is what we're targeting for the adoption of our new TIP that would take us through federal fiscal years 23 through 26. And then there's other items that will likely be added or come up, but that just gives you kind of a preview of some of those key the adoption dates and meeting topics that we're going to be discussing over the coming year.
And that doesn't meet everything that we as a board have to do.
Yeah, and I think the blue highlights a lot of these kind of core requirements that come up, either annually or on a frequent cycle. There's other items like RTP amendments that we might need to make additional or might add items that just to satisfy requests that come up from members, but. I think a number of the other items that we would kind of build off of this list would be more the informational items that we're presenting and asking for your input on. And then also wanted to mention that I think to also ensure that there's ample opportunity to process changes to projects in the TIP. We're also creating some additional amendment cycles, and so we're looking at 5 cycles for the coming year, and we would look for submission dates kind of the month prior to adoption. So for this one, we're looking for to get requests for this upcoming TIP amendment cycle by today. If you get it by the end of the week, that'd be great, so that we can start factoring those in. But that adoption date then would be at next month's meeting, and then that would be carried out throughout the year of adoption for update amendments at each upcoming meeting. So I can take any questions or topic feedback on topics that you would like to see now, or you can just shoot us those via email as well.
Really follow the meeting and follow we do that. I'll up there and down and we normally do a lot of these meetings and I have those back-to-back meetings. It really is a lot of information. So I know the mayor more appreciates it very much so. And I think it will help out a lot. Really have it working out. The one I was like last year, really ran out of the second meeting, getting the council, I made the board meeting all together. So I think it's really will be helpful. I know, like I said, the mayor apologies for not being able to be there tonight. I think we'll be very good.
I think it goes to what Faye and I have been talking about. It gives us more opportunity to talk as a group about projects that we have, so that we can have discussions about things that we have going on in our community, so that we're all more aware. I do feel like the meetings are kind of great out there.
And there does need to be effectiveness, the regional planning role is an executive role. The NCO role, those people in certain are almost reflecting to each other, but they still got especially the NCO role. As an old said, I will tell you that, the effectiveness is now, and try to, we want to look for that. And this kind of really thought and work from that research, just
One last thing, the TPB number normally, I'm going to tell the facility guard.
We'll be here in February.
We get pretty good gigs. This is really.
One of the things that you mentioned is one of the slides that was the bylaws of what government documents. In the bylaws, it does state that prior to the end of the calendar year, the schedule needs to be adopted by the board. So this is something that identifies information on that. According to the bylaws, it's supposed to be adopted. So I don't know what we want to do with that right now. Run it into the next slide.
Good. Yeah, chair's discretion. I mean, we're happy to gather feedback if you like, but we feel pretty confident this is a good approach. You've reserved the right to schedule additional meetings throughout the year if you like. So I don't think there's any harm with adopting the calendar today.
Motion, second, any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Any opposed? Motion passes and calendar is adopted. Anything else?
Any feedback you have about the facility, the parking, let us know. Anytime you make a recommendation, it's always good. Appreciate that. That's all we have.
Great. We will move on to our regular reports, and first we have FHWA, Pam.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just wanted to give a couple of things. We were talking a little bit about Bill, and Trey mentioned the notices that are coming out of the notices of funding opportunities. Those are grant opportunities that will describe criteria, who's eligible to put in, what kind of projects we're looking for, how things are going to be graded with that time. And so those are under development now. So we have a lot of guidance documents. There's a tremendous number of new programs. There's also a number of expansions of existing programs, and so there's going to be opportunities. So I don't have anything new in terms of guidance documents, but recognize as soon as we do have those, we're going to make sure that that's shared far-wide. We will also be around to answer questions, to help you get ready if you need to put in for applications. We can't comment on your application. Like you can't send it to us and say how does it look, but if you have questions on, making sure that that you as a region or an individual, everything's ready to go, we're more than happy to doing that, and we'll be working closely with NAP to do that. I will say that last Friday, the Bill Bridge Formula Program issued funding, and there was a big push. It was National Bridge Day. There was a big push last Friday to get funding for. There was apportioning $5.5 billion nationwide, which is the largest investment in bridge infrastructure since the signing of the Interstate Act. So this is good. This is real cash. And $60.4 million is apportioned to Tennessee. So the COMPET for apportionment, there are several apportionments out beyond that. There is a requirement to at least a minimum, not a maximum, but at least 50% on what we call off-system business. So those are about what's considered versus not interstate, not, maybe state highways. So this is a requirement and a recognition for officers. So I encourage y'all to take a look at that and see, what's available, if y'all are interested in. And that's the formula. There will be a subsequent bridge discretionary program, which is a grant application program. Right now, this is straight up formula and $60 million. Portion of Tennessee. I think it was mentioned previously, the federal certification review to do an audit. We're going to be kicking that off. We've got a meeting February 1st between NGO staff, CNOC, and school staff. We're going to be getting together to go over kind of the whole process, what's anticipated. We're going to be doing a presentation at an upcoming policy board meeting, and I'm sure we will get with y'all to determine what is the date for that for the transportation board. We're also going to be doing some community member outreach and getting an opportunity to visit with y'all to get some feedback on that. So if there's any questions on that, I'm happy to take on that. But that concludes my.
Yes, sir.
Ma'am, when you say whatever off-road or off, is that money going to be funneled through here or go out to the county highways through here?
It'll come through TI. And we don't fund the county. Let me say that again. We don't fund the county superintendent. We don't fund it like that. If funding goes to the county, it will come through TI.
So the word there is if, so now I run it over here. How are you all going to handle it?
I'm going to look at, to figure out how we're going to put that on.
Already answered that, right?
Yeah. I was writing that down.
They're doing a budget amendment for this program somewhere in the for bridges, so that it's not every bridge that has to go in, all the 6 minutes, we have a budget, and then it's the basic project comes up.
So why not take an idea that reach out to these areas outside the municipalities and see what they want, where that money could be spent, i.e. Guardrails?
This is for bridge structure. So.
Bridge structuring, period.
So, yeah, so reconstruction, rebuilding, replacement.
Bridges?
New bridges, yes, new bridges in old locations.
Replacement.
Replacement bridges, yes. You can do new bridges in new locations, and that would be up to CDOT to figure out how to keep the program. I'm on, totally out now. This is on the next question.
Right.
If it's in the engineering grant, I'm going to do that. I'm saying that this is in the engineering side of the department. You could speak for all, but part of the record. We've got a pretty good report. We do have very hard report. There should be somewhat of a roadmap.
I want to come back and discuss how to
How about the bridge? What's the time for meeting for the state? Is it over, how many years ago? 1 year, okay. I was going to say.
There'll be subsequent years.
Okay, it's over 1 year, 15% of 60 million. I'm just thinking structures in that year, but 15% down, minimum.
So just,
The state bridges serve a lot of people, we get that, but if it's 15% minimum, you're talking.
so educate me a little bit in regards to how does this fit into this board? Because I thought when that money came down, this board had to have say as to how that is spent. Is that not?
There will be, we could get input from different process for that.
Yeah.
So that our members aren't waiting around for y'all to make a decision on how to spend, like there's a fairly new, but bridge, type of money for bridges, so I think that'd probably be a good approach.
And as much as I want to be knowledgeable.
Right.
I got a question. How do you improve that? We had like 600 bridges that
needed to be repaired. You have used some of that to maybe get one of those bridges done. Improve that? You think improve that? No, you can go.
The list.
Help supplement. Exactly. Yeah, again, I mean, about 600 bridges already on the list that have to be repaired. I'm sure, I mean, how many of them have been done? Like, half, maybe, I don't know, half. I'm sort of thinking this money, because the money going up to F5.
I wish I could do more on behalf of the engineering bureau side of things, so I will make it if all of that. More study.
Can I follow up one more time, Madam Chairman, and I'm there?
Yes.
Matt, these top bridges, are you saying bridges in the unincorporated areas, the taxpayers pay for, bridges on state routes, or bridges that are in the county that the city uses to? You gonna break those all down, or is it gonna be one pot of money that cities, counties, and states have to figure out a way to handle?
Mayor, I don't know if I can answer that question. Again, I don't. That formula is probably not been developed, so it's in the process.
I lied, Madam Chairman.
And you think we're surprised by that? Go ahead.
Our bridges that's defined as railroad bridges.
I'm going to go on a 1 year session. Don't get to know that I'm not taking road work. So I'm in all fairness, all on the way home. Or you do it on my today. But this happens right. And so I'm guessing the department has not had an opportunity to determine all the questions that y'all have and encourage you to get all your questions together, follow up with you, but this happens right. If all your questions are not ready to
Okay. Any other questions for Federal Highway? Okay. Seeing none, we will move on to TDOT. And Matt, I'm assuming
Sure.
it's going to be you.
So in the interest of time, I won't say a lot other than congratulations to those grant recipients. As you know, the governor last week gave the blessing for CMAS, multimodal access grants, and through that transit capital grant. So if you were those blessing recipients, congratulations. If you have not received notification, or if you are notified that you did not get it, let's work together to try to find out where those applications fall short and maybe create a stronger one next time. But that is all I have.
Great. Any questions for TDOT? Okay. Now we'll move on to the chair's report. And Mayor Vogel sent me a statement for you guys and kind of what he was going to say under his chair's report. He wanted to let everyone know that he has enjoyed his first term as chair. That's obvious by his presence here today. And that he would like to appoint a nominating committee to bring back a slate of candidates for the chair and vice chair positions to serve out the remainder of the 22 calendar year, and that the committee will report back at the February election. And the nominating committee is going to consist of Paige Brown from the city of Gallatin, Randall Hutto from Wilson County, and myself from the city of Smyrna. So we will make sure to get that slate back to Mayor Vogel to present to this board. And other than that, I don't have anything else. So nope, not the last, but we will have staff report at this point.
I think in the interest of time, I can just send updates via email, but we will transition now into the GNRC Executive Board. Michael, do you want to give a preview of the agenda?
Big information item today is a look at how we can come together as a region and support the aging population that's out there that needs assistance to sustain quality of life. So looking forward to reconvening here in momentarily.
Okay. Anything else to come before this board? If nothing else, we are adjourned, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes between now and the next meeting. How's that work?
being here. And you do that, and you get me, Megan, and Candy, yeah, Michael, and also get, Mayor, Vice Chair, and Vice Chair, Commissioner on the side.